Hello, everyone, and welcome to another inspiring episode of our BA Leadership Talks. Today, we have the privilege of hosting true industry luminary, Ryland Leyton, a senior business analyst and agile coach at Cognizant Microsoft Business Group. Ryland's contributions extend beyond his professional roles. He has authored a number of remarkable books. The latest publication, The Rock Crusher, a model for flow-based backlog management, released just a few weeks ago on May 1st. The previous acclaimed work, The Agile Business Analyst, Moving from Waterfall to Agile, where Ryland shares his experience and mentoring his reader to be a more effective analyst. And in addition to it, Ryland is a core team member of the Agile extension of the BA BOK and IIBA Agile Specialization Exam. So hi, Ryland, and a warm welcome to our talk today.
Hi, Olivia. It's a pleasure to get to speak with you and the chapter.
The same. Great. So to begin our conversation, Ryland, could you please take us back to the beginnings of your career as a BA and Agile coach and share the journey that led you to where you are today?
Well, sure. I can try to give you the thumbnail on that. So the shortest sketch I can give is that I switched careers early in my life into IT. And the way it was, I was sort of a one-stop shop doing mostly query support for a group that did a lot of data gathering and data analysis, and I would do the query support work. But along the way, I got to do a lot of database programming, learning a lot about that and some web stuff and so forth, a lot of work with Excel and Access. And I was basically this one-stop shop for the IT needs of the local group that we worked with, or that we worked together with. And along the way, I had to do a lot of project management activities and a lot of business analysis activities, asking people what, I didn't think of it this way at the time, but like, what are your requirements and requirements analysis? And then I would wind up going and meeting those things. So it was, if you think about it, it was full life cycle stuff. When you think about the BA BOK, I would gather requirements, propose a solution, in my case, build the solution because of what I was working on. And then I would have to do solution assessment and validation along the way, where afterwards to see, did it meet the need? Because I continued to work with folks. It wasn't very iterative at the time. That isn't how we worked. It wasn't consciously iterative like now. But at the time, it was, this is the kind of work I did. To make a long story a little short, because we're talking about 25 years ago, I did that job for about 7 years. And towards the end of it, I had moved mostly into both project management and business analysis, kind of without knowing it. I left that company just due to the way life operates. I left there and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do next, but I wound up deciding that a BA job would be the main thing. I really looked at what I loved getting to do, and that was the thing out of all that stuff. So I then went to a senior BA position with another company where I'd stayed for about 7 years. And towards the end of that, I got involved in agile work. That company had heard of me internally. It was kind of another little branch. It was a startup. It was an in-house startup from the bigger company I already worked with. And a friend I used to work with worked at the little startup, and they had actually, this is the funny part, right? Imagine walking into an interview like this. I got the interview, they'd already heard of me, we'd already talked a lot, and they said, well, we fired all our BAs about 3 months ago. Why did you do that? They said, well, what we learned was we definitely need business analysts, but we didn't need those. They were from a consulting company, and they had a very rigid way of doing the work, and we didn't really like it. So our buddy over here, your friend that's been working with us for a while, said, you know a lot about requirements, and we know about a lot of agility, which I'd read some on and had some training on, but we never did anything with it up to this point in my life. But these guys were a startup in-house. They were an in-house startup, and they were working agility really, really rigorously. That's the only way they did their work. So they said, you know a lot about requirements. Why don't you come here? We'll teach you about agility, and we'll come up together with something that makes sense, that works for us here. Because we know we need BA work. We just definitely didn't need what those folks before you were doing. So I said, okay, that sounds fine. And I'm going to tell you one more piece of this story that I like to tell folks, okay? So they said, so there's one more thing we got to tell you about with this job before you take it. And now I'm really obviously listening. They are sitting, leaning in, being like, I'm going to tell you something really critical. I need you to hear it. You know how that is with all the body language and everything? You must have been there yourself sometimes. What I need you to know is this. So I'm sitting down, paying attention, making eye contact, ready to receive information, saying, I'm ready to hear it. And what they said was, sometimes our stakeholders don't know what they want, don't know it until they see it, can't explain it. And I said, okay, I heard you. What's the thing that's so difficult that you need me to know about? They're like, well, that was it. And I turned back to them and said, oh, and I just kind of sat up and I said, that's like the BA job. That's what we do. Stakeholders don't always know what they want, have a hard time explaining it, or might need to see it before they can say yes. Like, that's the job, right? I'm curious whether you are, and again, if you're listening to this recording, I hope you had that day also. I'm like, so I kind of said to them, that's what we call a Tuesday in business analysis. That's just normal work for us. So they kind of sat up also and said, okay. I said, yeah, so when can we start? This sounds exciting. When do we start? And they said, we're definitely starting. Let's figure out when. We got to talk to your manager and see how fast we can move you over here. I'm like, okay. So that was kind of my start into agility. Now, to tell you a little bit more, I took to it well. It was really exciting. It was kind of like immersion learning because everybody around me was old hands at doing it. I was learning from really skilled people. And from there, you may surmise like one of the people at my IIBA chapter was putting together our professional development day. And they were really looking for people to talk. And I'd done a little bit of group speaking by then, a little bit of talking, well, not as much as I've done now. We are talking about 20-ish years ago, I guess, maybe 15-ish years ago. And yeah, about 15 years ago. And I said I could do a piece on agility and business analysis and what I've learned having to do this stuff for, 6 or 8 months now. And she said, that sounds fantastic. Do you want like, how much time do you want? I don't know, 2 hours? Wound up taking 4 hours of the day. We rearranged the schedule a little bit and it went really well. So, I helped a lot of people with learning that. I guess the thing was I discovered then I loved the agility work. I loved business analysis and I loved helping people understand things. And that would later on, as you pointed out, that led to me writing that book because I kept getting asked questions that people thought were 5-minute questions and they weren't. Though it's like, well, what do I need to do to be successful as a business analyst? They'd ask me this like it was a 5-minute conversation. Like, why don't you read the book first and then let's talk about what doesn't fit for you or what works for you and what you're concerned about still with your environment. Because what I put down in there is what I think would work for everybody. And I wrote it because I was getting this question all the time. So that's kind of where I got to. That's how I got to here. And then since then, I guess the only thing to say since is I've gone, because of the way it works, I've gone a little past business analysis with my coaching work into coaching entire teams. Frequently, I focus on the BA as the hinge point for things. I like to say the BA is kind of the timing chain on a team because they work with the stakeholders and they work with the developers and they work with, if you're working in Agile, the Scrum Master or the project manager or elsewhere, whoever's kind of helping the whole thing work. But the BA kind of serves as the timing chain. If the BA is working well in an Agile world or a waterfall world, then the rest of the team functions well too. So with that, I'm gonna put a period somewhere here so that you can ask me if there's anything you want to talk about in those things I've offered you or something else.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And could you recall what is your most memorable achievement in your BA career? And what is the biggest challenge so far? And how did you approach it? What lessons did you learn from this?
Let's take those as two separate things. Memorable achievement. Honestly, I'm not sure because there have been a few different times. Each one kind of changes through time. Like writing that book and getting it and publishing it, and I did self-publish it. And it went really well. It went better than most people told me it would, which was kind of cool. I mean, this wasn't going to go like a romance novel with 700,000 copies sold. That's never the thing with a book like this. But somebody told me it would sell 400 copies. And that's how a book like that goes. And it did, let's just say about 10 times that. So that was like great. And at the time, that was pretty cool. So that was a huge accomplishment because it meant for me as a professional, people found the information valuable and people liked the way I explained it. And I needed to know that. That was really cool for me. So I think that was the most memorable to that point. Since then, honestly, a lot of my memorable achievements now come from the coaching space. I love working with teams and helping them get better at what they do, whether it's a BA team or who's learning more BA skills, or whether it's an agile team working better at growing in their agile maturity. Either of those things is something I just love getting to do. And it's an accomplishment for me because, I can only help somebody learn a thing. I can't make them learn it, right? You can present the way forward on skills like this. There's a saying I use in some classes: some things can't be taught, but they can be learned. So you create a learning opportunity for people and then they take it. That's cool. I love that. I love being involved in that. That's really cool. So I'll stop there for a second on accomplishments, I guess. So
that's great. And actually, it's really a pleasure when you could help someone to learn something and to direct. And actually, we already you mentioned a couple of times about your books. And actually, it's truly interesting to go behind the scenes and learn a bit more about the book writing process, how the work was organized, and especially how did you realize that you were ready to start this journey?
So I have talked about this a few times with folks, but usually it's more one-on-one. There are 3 books I've written. I'm not going to put them up on the screen. Nobody needs to see me wave a book around. They were very, very different writing experiences for me. And the first 2 I self-published, and the third, of course, is through the IIBA. And I guess I could include the Agile Extension as a writing event also. Let me break them into the 2 main categories for us. The 2 I wrote completely on my own, and then the 2 that I wrote collaboratively, because the Agile Extension and the Rock Crusher were both very collaborative books, conveniently with 2 guys that I worked with there. So let's do the collaborative one first. So that was a whole other accomplishment, if you want to call it, and it was interesting. I'll tell you about the Agile Extension piece. So I got asked to join in with the group of people, which is originally, I think it was a group of 6 or 8. I forgot how many people. I'm sorry, I'd have to pull it up to look it up. But Jazz Full at the IIBA asked me to get involved because he'd seen my book, and he liked how I made information accessible to people, which you can see is kind of a thread of things I like doing. And I met the group of folks first in Atlanta, and then we did another working session a few months later, working on our own in pieces disconnectedly, asynchronously. We did another session in Vancouver. And in Atlanta, to start with, I will tell you, I had the biggest time of imposter syndrome I have ever had in my life. I am in a room with people who have multiple publications to their name, have, frequently one or many advanced degrees, are considered names in the field. And I'm sitting here saying, what the hell am I doing in the room with these people? How did I get here? I don't mind being here, but oh my God, when am I going to be discovered as, Ryland only knows this thing. But I kind of quickly discovered where I was fitting in. And that was really powerful for me. I want to encourage people who are watching this, because if you're a junior BA or mid BA, don't let imposter syndrome get in your way. If you've been invited into a room, there's a reason someone invited you in. Okay? Don't shy away from being there. Don't sit on the wall and not interact. I'm not saying you can do what I did, which is I took a little while to observe how people interacted before I could see what I could contribute. But I didn't shy away from contributing it. And a couple of things I contributed, I'll tell you a moment of one of them. Like, I thought it was a big deal. Like, we were all talking around some ideas, and I said, I think what we're saying is this. And I put a little model up on the wall about it. We were doing big room. This was before COVID. So we were doing, big room stuff with bulletin boards and paper and Post-it notes and whiteboards. And it was fun. I got to put this up on the wall. And then one of the other people in the room, I think it was Kent McDonald, actually. Kent had just been pacing around the perimeter of the room at this point. Kent stopped and said, good, I'm glad you've all figured that piece out. Now let's talk about the next thing. And I'm like, okay, so you've been holding that for an hour or 2. Wonder why. But at the same time, I'm like, okay, well, at least I guess I put that idea into concept for everybody. And that would happen a few other times. And I think the other major contribution I made there, I guess to talk about the writing process, to make it simple, we all had ideas to contribute. And every once in a while, we had to step back to see what made sense with the goal of the book. Because if I'm calling it a book, and I forget how many pages, but it's like close to, I think it was 80 to 100. I don't recall right now. It had a very specific focus. It had a frame it had to fit in. So we had to edit rigorously to get rid of that. And we had to debate each other on what was needed. And I guess for me, the thing I liked the most, and it is a reason I was in the room, I kept bringing it back to the practitioner. So yourself, BAs at the IIBA, BAs who are in the field, BAs in practice, people adjacent to BA stuff like product owners, now that they're more central to the BA, to the IIBA and so forth. But my role in that was to learn how to keep my focus of, is this idea going to make a difference to somebody who actually has to go out and do the work? I don't want it to be academic. It doesn't mean it's a bad idea, but how can we focus it? And that was sort of writing those two books. And the same was, so I mean, with both books, that was the thing. So collaborative is very different than writing independently. So I hope that makes sense about the collaborative piece. First, I'm going to see, did I leave you with any questions as my interviewer here before I talk about the other one?
Actually, yes, I have one question related to this extension particularly. So what was your motivation to be a part of this team?
At first, it's just
you've been invited, right?
Yes. First that I had just been asked, I'm like, okay, I've never been asked to do something like that before. Possibly say no. How can I possibly turn down that kind of opportunity to be a part of writing one of the industry standards on a topic? You know, it's you'll notice it's been several years and nobody's asked us to write a V3. I will happily be involved in a version 3 if it comes up, if anybody wants me to be. But until then, I don't know. So I think it's probably still holding up as a decent thing. And for those of you that are curious, by the way, I want to put this out there. That's a free download from the IIBA. And I think it's a good first go-to for agile learning. If you are figuring out what agility means for you as a business analyst, go to the website, get the extension as a free download, and go ahead and read it. I really think it's useful. You remember that first job I told you about, Yulia, where I had to figure out how to do agility as a BA? I printed out what was then version 1 of the BA, of the Agile extension. And I had marked it up with notes. I had Post-it notes on the side of things I could index quickly when I needed to. And it was one of the most useful things I had ever read. So I'm telling you, both version 1, if you still can get it, I think it's still worth reading. Version 2, we kept a lot of version 1 in the sense of concepts and content. We didn't like copy pieces over from it. But I think both are useful reads. And I encourage you, if you're going to be a person doing BA work in an agile context and it's your first time doing it, print out version 2, mark it up, keep it near your desk. You know, I hope it's been translated, but if not, I don't know what to tell you there. So I found that useful. I encourage anybody to. So did you have another question, Julie?
Yeah. Actually, yeah, you already mentioned that the experience of like non-collaborative book writing is with another. So
yeah,
maybe
let's talk about that. Absolutely. So writing my first book, which again is part of what got me invited to write the extension. I remember what happened. I mean, I had never written a book before. I've had a friend who was wanting to be a writer and wanted to write books, and I never had the impulse. I didn't understand the impulse they had. But now I kind of did, because I know this is going to sound a little funny. And I joke that I wrote that book because everyone kept coming up to me and asking me the same questions. And that is intended to be funny. It's true, but it's also funny. Another real reason here, I remember the day it was happening. I'd been kind of mulling it over for a day or two. I felt this serious calling, like a deep need to write a book about this topic. I needed to do it in an artistic way. This is a piece of artwork for me. I'm going to pick that up. When I wrote this, I had an idea of what I wanted to create. And I kind of very quickly came to the idea that I'd be self-publishing, because I didn't want to argue with anybody about the thing I wanted to create. This was intellectual artwork for me, if that makes sense. I knew the things I wanted to explain. I had a vision of how I wanted to explain them that would change over the 6 months I wrote the manuscript. And that was it. So I felt this deep calling to write this thing, whether it sold 20 copies or 2,000 copies, I didn't care. I felt a need to write it, which is, I think, when I speak to anybody out there who has an impulse to write a book or thinks about something on that scale, you have to really want to do it. I mean, you have to have a deep need. Like if you didn't do it, something would be wrong. You would feel something missing in your life. That's how this felt to me. I felt like if I don't do this, I will not only regret it, I will be mad at myself because I didn't do it. So I did consult my family about it because I said, this is going to take me a lot of time. I'm going to have to be in the basement writing. I'm going to have to figure out how I've done it because I've never written a book before. I've written training classes. I've written documents that are very long that weren't just requirements work, but I've never written a book. So I consulted a few people who were, well, I was saying about my family. I talked to my family about it, my husband, and said, this is going to take a lot of time. How do you feel about that? And he said, you feel like this is important to you, go ahead and do that. I'll support you. So I appreciated that. And, we worked out pieces. So we still had our weekends together and things like, I'm going to write for half a day. After a while, your writing becomes, there's a point of diminishing returns. You can only write for so long before everything looks the same and my mind is just tired. So I had to learn a lot about that. And it was great. I absolutely loved having written it. I learned a lot about writing and editing and book composition. I worked with somebody who could do all of those things, which was nice. And I paid a professional person to work with me on those topics so that the book would come out the way I envisioned wanting it, right? This was finishing my piece of art I wanted to create and put into the world. And again, I'm very, very grateful that it did well in the sense of being received by the BA audience, and I think people still pick it up here and there, but again, there's a lot more information out there now for BAs about agility. I don't think I think it's still a book that stands up from people who read it and tell me that. I just think that BAs are now a little more steeped in agility day to day than necessarily needing my book. So that's fine. But I loved writing it, and it was definitely a solo thing, and there was still a lot of editing to do. My editor helped with that, saying, is this really essential? And half the time she challenged me about that, I would take things out because it was sort of looking at it and saying, it's not. That needs to come out, and maybe it'll become a chapter on its own, or maybe not. It'll just sit there. That's okay. So editing is, I got to tell everybody here, editing is such an important skill to learn as a BA. This helped a lot with that for me. If you wind up with everyone saying your documents are too long, then you need to learn how to edit. It might be that you learn how to condense things, or you learn, no, that's got to be that long. That's got to be there, but at least you now know why. And that's the thing I could explain with my book, in writing my book. So I think that was it. It was just, you have that freedom and artistic license when you do it independently. And that was really cool. And I did that on that. And I did that on my other book, also the career book I read, which, it's also one of those things. It was a passion project. And I said, I have to write this. I want to write this. These are ideas I want to be portable beyond myself. So probably more than you wanted to know, but there you go.
Yeah. And by the way, how long did it take from the idea came out? It became to be a plan, and then it was printed out.
I started pretty quickly. I guess the whole thing, actually, I can joke, it's my baby because it took 9 months. From deciding I would start to having a printed book in my hand was 9 months. And it was kind of intense. I mean, there were times it was more, times it was less, but it took a lot of discipline, honestly, I took an agile approach to it. I set up, not that you could see it here, but picture at the time, I set up a wall for this. I started putting up my tasks, like I need an outline. What's going to be in the outline? I need to come up with a chapter structure. I need to have the right outline turned into chapters. I need to pick a chapter at a time. I need to get the chapters into something where I can get an editor done. At the time I started on it, I didn't have an editor. So I had like infrastructure tasks. I have to have an editor. I have to find someone to compose. I have to choose a platform for publishing this. At that point, I hadn't decided how I would do it. So I applied my agile principles to the whole thing and said, what can I get started on? What can I get working through? And then My overall outline turned into chapter outlines. My chapter outlines became fleshed out to finished chapters with notes of like where I got to build a diagram. I still had to build diagrams. So there was a certain amount of iteration to this too. Because I didn't necessarily have the diagrams before I started, and I didn't stop writing every time to finish them. I would write what I knew what I wanted the diagram to show. So there was a lot of process to come up with. That's why I said, if you don't love doing it, it's not going to work. But I did love doing it. I really did. It was really cool. And I learned a lot along the way. I said, I need an editor. I don't know how to find an editor. I mean, picture that. If you wanted to write a book tomorrow, would you know who to call to get the professional skills? I didn't. So it was that kind of thing. Those are the kinds of things. Let me put one pin on that for people who might be listening, for your chapter members and others. If you're interested in doing something like this and you really are passionate about it, go do it. Don't be afraid that you don't know what to do. Write down your questions, like I pointed out I did. And then, you can find on the internet a lot of things. I found a lot of ways to hire an editor on the internet. None of them seemed great to me. I didn't find anybody through it, but I tried. I spent a couple of hours trying to find an editor on the internet. And then I remember I know some people who've written books or who are in publishing, and I asked them for help. But I might not have thought of that until I tried the other processes first, and they didn't work, But don't be afraid of it. Just try it. You'll learn so much more working on your own passion project than you will at anything at your job, because you're dying to do the thing that's your passion project. Don't be afraid of it. Whatever it is, try something small, write some blog articles if you need to. Those kinds of things, just start. If you're really wanting to do it, start. That's all I can tell you. Okay? So I like adding those in. I hope they're useful for people when we talk about it.
Yeah, actually, thank you for this motivation kind of, and your experience is truly invaluable in this area, and actually it's a huge contribution into into business analysis profession development, by the way.
Thank you.
So, yeah, that's great.
Okay. You had asked me about my biggest challenge, and I don't think I'd answered you.
Okay.
So I'm going to tell people this because I think it's important to know. Earlier in my career, about 18 years ago now. Well, actually, closer to 20-ish years ago, I guess, something like that. I have to think about it. I was a good BA, a solid BA, but I was having trouble in a certain area, and I'm going to talk about that for a sec. And what I'm really grateful for is I had a supervisor who sat me down and brought my new manager, because this was my manager had been promoted to being a director, and a new person was now my manager. Both of them asked for time with me on a Friday, booked a little meeting with me, and said, and my old boss, who I was close with, said, Ryland, I want you to understand, I need to give you some feedback. Before I do that, I want you to understand your job is safe. You're a valued member of this team, and I'm looking forward to seeing you on Monday. I also know I'm going to give you some difficult feedback today, but I want you to know none of this is going to negatively affect your job in the sense of like you being disciplined or anything else. That's not what's happening here today. There's no disciplinary action. There's no anything happening. Now I'm really nervous, and this is a long time ago. But I said, okay, I understand, and do that. And he said, you are looking to advance in your career. You've been asking me what it would take to get promoted or to have more important projects or other things. This is before I did the Agile stuff, by the way. And he said, there's something in your way and you don't know about it. And I said, okay, what is it? Because I'm bothered by this, but I'm getting it. He said, you're not treating people very well. And I literally was like, I'm not? What are you talking about? He said, that's what I'm here to tell you about. He said, and to make a story a little shorter, I was not acknowledging the culture where I now worked, the business culture. I was using the culture of the previous job I had. Remember, I said I'd worked somewhere for about 7 years, and then I went to another company. So this was the new company. I was acting culturally like I was at the other company, which was very structured. At this other company in the past, and this is how I was acting, if someone came to, if you went to anybody, if I were looking for a meeting with somebody, I would go to them and they would invite me. They would ask, they might ask me a little about it, but then they would say, that sounds great. I'm kind of in the middle of things. Why don't you book time on my calendar for, tomorrow or the next day or something? You never really necessarily got to meet with people right then, but you would get time on their calendar for the future. And you would frequently ask them if it was okay to talk to them at the time, right that minute, to interrupt them. That was the kind of thing. And he said to me, for example, at this company, you're doing the things from this old company. And at this company, the standard is drop what you're doing and meet with them then. Whatever it is, if you're not already in a meeting and someone comes up to meet with you, you stop what you're doing and help them. And people were being very put off by the fact that I was acting like I was at my other company, not realized. I had not noticed. And it is stupid that I had not noticed it, but I was much younger and I did not notice this. That was simply corporate culture at my old company, and the new one, completely different. Is that making sense, Julia?
Yep.
Okay. He said this and one or two other minor things that were similar to that were holding me back. He said, people have a negative impression of you because of this. He said, they do? He said, yeah, they do. They have a lot of, I'm not going to go into them because it's embarrassing, but they had a lot of negative beliefs about me when all I wanted to do was be helpful, but I was making it hard for us to connect in a helpful way. Not knowing that I was doing this. I want to emphasize, I had no idea. And he let me know, yes, I mean, we talked at length. We talked about 60 to 90 minutes. And by the end of it, I gave him back what he was giving me. I said, I want to make sure I understand you. This is the things you've said that I need to change. And you're saying this is the way I should change them. He said, yes, you have that correct. He said, I know this has been difficult. You haven't, and you've done a good job of not being defensive, and you've done a good job of hearing me. And I see you've taken your notes and you understand what we're here to talk about. So I will help you in any way you want. Just remember, this is up to you. I can't change this for you. And you should expect this will take 6 months for people to understand that your behavior has changed and the way you work has changed. What I'm telling all of you out there is, if you come into one of these yourself, remember, picture anyone you've worked with who's sometimes difficult to work with. How long would it take you to believe that they have really changed versus you just caught them on a good day? So Dave was doing a good job of explaining this to me and saying, you should do this, but expect nothing out of it for at least 6 months. Truth is, it took less than that because I was very aggressive in a positive way. I was making sure I did this at every opportunity. If somebody came to my desk, I started saying, sure, let me put down what I'm working on. Can I help you right now? Oh, no, I need it can we meet tomorrow? I'm like, if you'd prefer to meet tomorrow, sure, but I can make time now if you'd like. No, tomorrow's good. Okay. So I would try to blend those things, and it went better because I'll be honest, remember, I wanted to be, what did I say about the books? I want to be helpful. I want to be getting people whatever it is that they need. That's my goal in life. So I was doing those things. And that was the biggest challenge. So I think what I'm telling you is skills are one part and people skills are the other part. And you got to have both. And that weekend, I went home, I ordered in Chinese food, I hugged the dog, I sat on the couch with a mug of tea, I watched a movie, and I felt really bad for a lot of it, thinking, oh my God, I have been so stupid because here I am trying to help people and I totally messed it up. And it was a hard weekend. And Monday I went back to work and it was good. And I got started on it. So that's what that was.
Actually, this is great and deep story you've shared. And I believe that our listeners will be able to learn from it and catch the right insights. So. All right. And to continue, what do you think about the future of the business analysis profession?
I think it's interesting. I think business analysis is going to continue to be a little hard for people to define who aren't in the field. And it's going to be a thing where we continue to have to explain our value and what kinds of services and benefits we create in projects and any kind of effort, okay? So I think there's going to be that. I think the agile skills are going to become more and more important because even if you're working in a waterfall program, you're going to need to apply agile skills here and there because waterfall programs can really benefit from them. And I think that's a common thing you're going to see more and more. I hope that people take advantage of certification. I can tell you that when I'm hiring for a BA, seeing certifications matters to me. And I think it does to anybody who's a skilled and careful practitioner. We know, well, like for me, I know when someone has, I mean, I've done a few certificates. I've done PMPs, I've done the PMP, I've done the CBAP, I've done CSM. I know how hard a test is, so I have an idea of what you've passed and what you've learned and what I should expect from you, and it helps a candidate stand out. So I think those things are in the future. I think that for BAs, when I see the junior credential versus the CBAP, that's still good, especially in someone who's new to the field. Okay, so I'm just telling you, I think those things matter. Okay, as opposed to like the CSM, which is not meaningless, don't get me wrong, but it's a 2-day class and a fairly straightforward test. So it tells me you've taken a training class. I'm not putting it down. I'm just saying it's a very different thing than the CBAP, which requires you to have studied, a body of knowledge, which is hundreds of pages long, and ask and answer application level questions like, do you know the material and can you apply the material? That's the test. And of course, I think it's a 2,000-hour work requirement, if I recall. So it's those kinds of things. There's a whole different level to the testing and certification. It tells me a lot that you've done it, and I know I'm going to have some good interview questions for you if you have. I think that's the future direction. I think we're going to be involved in more things. I still think we're just going to have to explain our value to people.
Yeah, that's interesting. And if to talk about you, how do you stay up to date with the latest trends and technologies in the business analysis field?
It's a good question, and I'm not sure I have a great answer for you because usually I'm writing a lot of content, so staying up on it is a different thing. For me, honestly, I love going to conferences here and there and learning about it. A lot of my personal learning right now is around the agility space, how to do better coaching, how to intersect BA and agility more strongly. So I guess it's conferences and occasionally what crosses my path on LinkedIn. And I participate in a couple of agile coaching circles that I find very interesting where people just bring ideas to it. And that's how I get up on that. So I think for other people, participating in, chapter meetings is a very important way. Find a few authors you like following and follow them on LinkedIn, see what they're saying, even just see what they're sharing. Like I don't write a whole lot for LinkedIn, for example, but if I find something interesting, I'll echo it there and say, this was fascinating to me. Perhaps you'd like to read it and why. So those are things I would suggest to people.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And you have an exemplary leadership journey as a business analyst and agile coach. What would you advise to your younger colleagues who just started or somewhere in the middle of their BA path?
Well, what I tell folks to do about this is figure out what you're passionate about, okay? Figure out what that thing is that you love in the BA field. And it can be anything. There's no judgment on this topic, okay? It can be that you like making great diagrams. It could be that you enjoy writing understandable material. It could be that you like running workshops and facilitating things. Whatever it is, you need to know that thing because that way you can try to get more of it. You can follow your passion because when you follow your passion and you can figure out what things it connects with that work needs you to do, you're going to stand out in your job more, right? Because you're doing things that work needs you to do. What manager doesn't love having an employee that's excited about doing things that their job needs them to do, right? So you do those things and you're going to wind up standing out a bit at your job, or at least you're going to enjoy it more because you're doing more things that you love getting to do, right? That matters a lot. And this then becomes a virtuous cycle because you then get asked to do more of those things because people see you taking action on it. And I can tell you, this works. That is exactly what I did. The thing I love, in case you couldn't get it from an earlier part of this conversation, was I love being part of that aha moment where people learn something new, where people get the next level of their work, or a group of people in a workshop see something that they couldn't see before. Like I helped as a BA make the problem clear through, all right, I think what we're saying is the problem statement is this, and a successful solution would look like this. Do we agree on that before we start talking about requirements? Like, I love moments like that. I kind of live for them. So any place I can get that, I'm likely to get involved in on a personal basis. If you know that as a BA, then it'll pull you towards the things you love doing, and you'll learn from that. This is iterative in your own service. Don't expect it to pop out in the next couple of days. But if you know what it is, pursue it. And if you don't know what it is, start experimenting.
Yeah, that can be noted, actually.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ryland, for this captivating conversation today.
You're
We
welcome.
truly appreciate your time and willingness to share your experience and thoughts with us. And thank you once again for being a part of our BA Leadership Talks. And we look forward to the positive impact your words will have on our listeners.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. It's a wonderful project to be a part of.
Thank you.